The plot is that of a thriller. A Pakistani soap opera woven from scandal, vendetta, corruption and murder. At its heart, a playboy, Asif Zardari, accused of stealing millions from state coffers and conspiring to kill his own wife's brother.
You've heard the oldest cliches in the world. Give a dog a bad name and then hang him for anything you want to hang him for.
By his side, his consort, the fairy tale princess who became the most powerful woman in the land. Benazir Bhutto, once Prime Minister of Pakistan, now disgraced and thrown out of office amidst accusations of nepotism, corruption and abuse of power.
It reminds me of the time when people were burnt as witches at the stake.
Now the people will vote for a new government. A knight in shining armor has sworn to save the poor of Pakistan from what he calls the corrupt elite.
So far, the sharks have got away with it.
But at the end of the day, will the princess and the playboy really have to face the music? The cricketers of Larkana compete for their annual trophy. Benazir Bhutto, the most famous daughter of this small town, will present it. Miss Bhutto herself was bowled out just 3 months ago by one of her own team, the President of Pakistan. It is he who deposed her. She cried foul play. Now she is determined to win the coming elections and claim the biggest trophy of all, revenge on the man she anointed president. It is he who has accused her and her husband of plundering Pakistan.
Only the people of a country say who is fit to rule and who is not fit to rule. And the people of Pakistan voted for me. They didn't vote for the president. Who is the president? I picked him up. I picked him up and I said to my people that I want him elected. He has no mandate. He has no credibility. He has no support. I am the elected Prime Minister of Pakistan.
When the Prime Minister violates the Constitution of Pakistan again and again, when she and her government indulges in massive corruption, then under our Constitution, it is the obligation of the President to act.
The chief target of the corruption investigation was seized just hours after the President acted to throw out Miss Bhutto's government last November. Asif Zardari, her husband, is brought to court for a hearing from his prison cell, where he's being held on a charge of conspiracy to murder and 2 corruption counts. The government says more are in the pipeline. Mr. Zardari defended himself in an exclusive interview with Assignment.
They just have to attack somebody. They have to make a target and then they have to build around it. They can't build around her because she's known. She has an international perception. People know her. She's worked in politics for the last 15 years. They can't seem to make anybody believe that there's something wrong with her. So who do they have to make believe that there's something wrong with? Is the husband, because if you hit the husband, you're hitting it home.
In a vast family mausoleum still under construction, Benazir Bhutto marks the anniversary of her father's birth. She's determined to ensure the magic of the Bhutto name lives on. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto became Prime Minister in 1972. He was an autocratic, feudal landowner with a socialist vision. He was hung by a military dictator, martyred in the cause of democracy. Benazir inherited her father's mantle. Her life echoed his own. A bright student at Oxford, she was imprisoned by the general who killed her father and exiled in London. In 1986, she returned in triumph to take over as leader of her father's People's Party of Pakistan. She was a princess, waiting to become the queen of her country. This educated, westernized woman who challenged martial law seemed to have a real chance of breaking her own and her country's feudal bonds to bring new hope to the poor of Pakistan. Finally, in 1988, the princess was crowned the first woman prime minister of an Islamic state. But the dream soon disintegrated. Within 2 years, she'd been dismissed, her husband jailed, facing charges of murder and corruption. 9 years later, for the second time, Benazir is once more alone. Her government dismissed, her husband in jail. Critics say he's her weak spot. The arranged marriage was a glittering occasion. The beautiful heir to a powerful dynasty was over 30, and a husband was a vital accessory. Mr. Zardari was handsome and charming, even if his pedigree hardly matched his wife's. But some in the family disapproved. The Bhuttos are big landowners, the aristocracy of the province of Sindh. Mumtaz Bhutto, head of the Bhutto clan and Benazir's political rival, has always dismissed Mr. Zardari as an unsuitable match.
He has no social standing, no political standing. His father was a cinema owner. His father sold all his property and made a cinema in Karachi. And later on he sold that, and at the time when Benazir married Asif Zardari, his father was being tried for bank fraud cases. So they only had a dilapidated and crumbling house in Karachi, and it is a family which has no background whatsoever from any point of view.
Despite the dismissal of her first government, in the 1993 elections, Ms. Bhutto fought back. Those first corruption and murder charges against Asif Zardari had failed, and he again became a member of parliament that year. Ms. Bhutto waited anxiously to see if the usual political horse trading which had taken place had secured her party enough seats to form a government.
Commanding the confidence of the majority of the members of the Senate.
Benazir Bhutto was back in power, taking over from her rival, Nawaz Sharif.
Is a contest. I look forward to a good relationship with you.
Nawaz Sharif had precipitated the election when he himself was dismissed for corruption. Benazir Bhutto installed Farooq Lagari, one of her old party faithfuls, as president. She believed she could count on his loyalty. But last November, her former ally summarily dismissed her, saying her misrule was threatening to bankrupt Pakistan.
The president has submitted a hefty justification of his dismissal of Benazir Bhutto's government here at the Supreme Court of Pakistan. It reads like a political thriller, accusing her of sanctioning a shoot-to-kill policy. And it raises questions about the murder of her own brother. But most detailed of all are the 200 pages cataloguing corruption, nepotism, and violation of the rules of government. Those charges are laid at the door of Ms. Bhutto and her husband Asif Zardari. We've been investigating the allegations against the former first couple, which have divided both the country and the Bhutto dynasty.
In the courtyard of Ms. Bhutto's home in Lakhana, the Pakistani style of politics, patronage and feudal obligation has remained unchanged for decades. Petitioners wait outside to ask favors in return for delivering votes. Loyalty and votes have always been bought by every party in Pakistan. But Ms. Bhutto is accused by the president of using patronage to concentrate power in her own hands in an unprecedented way. The parliament Parliament in Islamabad was not the place where real power lay. It lay here in the Prime Minister's Secretariat, where, according to her critics, Ms. Bhutto controlled virtually all aspects of government, including the powerful finance ministry. An extensive computer system charts every detail of the patronage that oiled the wheels of the system. Many of the favours were granted, according to the records, on the direct orders of the Prime Minister herself. In the inner sanctum of the computer room, we saw acres of paper detailing jobs, free land and grants given to individuals. The President says Ms. Bhutto used the power of the Finance Ministry to enrich and to impoverish to the first couple's advantage, ignoring the rules of government.
The entire governmental processes, the cabinet, all these were being used as rubber stamping fora for getting projects and programs through, which did not have any relevance to the economic needs of the people of Pakistan, but which were white elephant projects and had massive kickback and commission opportunities.
Accusations, accusations, accusations. And I say those accusations were lies, they were unfounded. Of course I had the reins of power. I was Prime Minister. The Constitution says the Prime Minister is Chief Executive. But I was Chief Executive to bring about social enlightenment. I was Chief Executive to show Islam as a religion of moderation. I was Chief Executive to promote the rights of women and minorities.
And not to channel power through your office.
I was not Chief Executive for business interests.
Finding the evidence of wrongdoing in high places is proving a difficult process. A former friend of Ms. Bhutto's, newspaper editor Najam Sethi, is the government advisor on corruption. In the Prime Minister's office, he's tracking down what evidence can still be found in the files.
Well, in theory, every opinion or comment that any government official or functionary makes is supposed to be noted on the files. But what has happened is the last government came up with some innovations. These little slips of paper were introduced. These were stuck onto the files. Comments were actually made on these little slips of paper. When decisions were finally taken, these slips of paper were removed and put into the shredder. So the real evidence, all the reasons for taking certain decisions which could not have been upheld legally, in fact, were defenseless. All those little notations were made on these yellow slips of paper.
The Prime Minister's residence in Islamabad is deserted these days, except for the staff. It was here that Ms. Bhutto's critics say she allowed her husband to hold court. In these gilded salons, Mr. Zardari met industrialists from all over the world. The President says he was the de facto Prime Minister, wheeling and dealing to his own advantage.
According to the President's charges, corruption and violation of the rules wasn't systematic, it became the system itself. And it all stemmed from these offices. But investigators are going to find it hard to make any charges stick. Asif Zardari rarely put his name to any piece of paper. He didn't need to. Many businessmen have told us it was an open secret that Zardari was the most powerful man in Pakistan. Any big deal needed his blessing and the participation of one of his cronies. Then red tape would be miraculously severed and contracts awarded in just days, not months.
Shortly before Ms. Bhutto's government was dismissed, she made her husband investment minister, a new position which some said was designed to regularize his meetings with businessmen and his increasingly controversial role in state affairs. Mr. Zardari had already damaged his wife's career once. He was again unpopular, but she wouldn't hear it.
I thought of her as a friend, and I thought it my duty to go and tell her what the public thought. I said, Ms. Bhutto, in the old days, they used to say that Asif Zardari was a crook. Now they're saying you're partners in crime. Please do something about this perception. And she flew off in a rage, and she raved and she ranted, and she said she didn't accept a word of criticism. What do you do?
And did he turn out to be her partner in crime?
That's what I think. And I think we have the evidence to prove that.
The allegation, though, is that using your office as Prime Minister, everything passed through all the files, all the business. Your husband was very powerful in the setup at the Prime Minister's house, and this is in effect how the misrule took place.
I think people should decide that, don't you? I think people of Pakistan should decide that.
Do you deny that that was the case?
Yes, I do. I do. I deny it.
But in many of Pakistan's big state industries, witnesses say Mr. Zardari and his friends have been active. Pakistan Steel has lost billions, and the chairman is under arrest. He has told investigators about 8 deals involving the Prime Minister's husband and his associates. A tender offer was desired by Asif Zardari, he says. Another contract was awarded under the directions of Mr. Zardari. These men from the Pakistan Steel Dealers Association protested when the biggest contract of all was given for less than 1/3 of its real value to certain favourites. The dealers offered double the price, but their offer was rejected. $6 million was lost to the exchequer in this one deal. Pakistan Steel's chairman claimed he was paying out money to Mr. Zardari.
Did the chairman of Pakistan Steel ever make it clear to you or your members that Mr. Asif Zardari was somehow behind this?
He was always, to our member dealers and other dealers who are working with Pakistan Steel, he referred many times that I have to pay a amount of 100 million per month to Dulha Bhai.
And Dulha Bhai is?
Mr. Asif Zardari.
Dulha Bhai is the Urdu word for bridegroom. That's Mr. Zardari?
Yes.
The rice market, too, according to the president, was manipulated in an unprecedented way, and this time Miss Bhutto herself was involved. A friend of her husband's was in effect granted the right to buy half of the entire country's rice production at rock-bottom prices. We've obtained a document from the Prime Minister's Secretariat, which features Benazir Bhutto's own handwriting, ordering the State Rice Corporation to procure rice at very high prices to honour the deal. Her initials are on the paper. She overruled her officials' objections, claiming legal obligation. Her decision cost the exchequer $41 million. It was just one of many deals, which the present government calculates lost the state an estimated $12 billion during Miss Bhutto's last government. The president's convinced a significant amount went into the pockets of the first couple.
The husband of the Prime Minister used to boast amongst his friends that he and Benazir had already skimmed $1.5 billion of the Pakistan economy in the 3 years that they had been in power.
You were known as Mr. 10%. How can you account for that?
But for 3 years I was in prison before, and I was known as Mr. 10% then. How come in 3 years they couldn't prove anything?
I can't be there sitting inspecting everything myself.
Benazir Bhutto's making a royal progress through Lakhana. A few villagers turn out to wave. But there are no large enthusiastic crowds. Miss Bhutto's losing support even here in her party's heartland. She's been damaged by the charge of misrule, but insists she always acted in the interests of the people.
So the president's accusation that you actually lost over 40 million is wrong.
It's wrong.
No charges have yet been brought against her personally, nor has she been barred from the election. She challenges the president to a legal fight, not a propaganda war.
Go to a trial court. Why a media court? Why a smear campaign? Go to a court. There are laws. There are courtrooms. But we are not to be tried by the law. We have to be tried by the media. Because when you try somebody by media, people get confused. They're not lawyers. They don't know the rules. They don't know the regulations. They don't have access to all the documents. So try somebody by the media and sentence them, because you know they're innocent and you can't do it by a court of law.
In Islamabad, the grandest of public buildings is nearing completion. It was to be the Prime Minister's new secretariat. Inside, the marble is richly embellished. The interior decoration contract was given to a cousin of Benazir Bhutto's. But now this palace may never be completed. It has become a white elephant.
This is what they think of their own status. This is what they think of the money that is the taxpayers' money. This is how they want to squander it away. It's really a very tragic situation. This is a poor country. We can't afford these things. There is impoverishment, rising unemployment on the one hand, and on the other hand, these fantastic lifestyles of the rich and famous, or the bold and beautiful, if you want to say that.
Behind the new secretariat, the building workers live in a shanty town. They have to cope with the reality of life in Pakistan during Benazir Bhutto's tenure, rising inflation and growing unemployment. In the tea shop, there's cynicism about their rulers.
होते ही हैं तकरीबन, लेकिन ज़्यादातर अख्तियारात प्राइम मिनिस्टर को होते हैं। उससे तो लोगों को उम्मीदें होती हैं, जब वो बरसरे इक़्तिदार आता है, यही होता है कि वो अवाम की, कौम की तरक्की हो। ऐसा ना हो कि उसके बाद वो बजाय तरक्की के मुल्क को पीछे रिवॉल्ट कर दें।
कि हम लोगों का जो दिल है अंदर से, वो बिल्कुल मुर्दा ज़मीर हो चुका है। इसलिए कि हम लोगों ने इतनी उम्र होगी हुकूमतें देखते हुए और गरीब आदमियों को पिसते हुए।
According to the president, Pakistan's poor, as well as its industrial corporations, have been the victims of corrupt officials in Miss Bhutto's government. The Bet-ul-Mal was a charity for widows and orphans. 2 cheques from the fund's account for millions of rupees were made out personally to Miss Bhutto's close associate, the Interior Minister. The money should have been distributed to needy tribesmen. But the receipts, according to police experts, reveal that thumbprint signatures, supposedly made by thousands of illiterate recipients, were in fact all made by a few individuals. The allegation is that they were forged and the funds misappropriated.
With the Widows and Orphans Fund, the allegation there is that cheques were made out to individuals in the Prime Minister's office, ministries, and that the receipts were forged. And this was a charity in your personal gift over which you had control.
For goodness sakes. For goodness sakes, I mean, I really don't know. People really have vivid imaginations. I didn't run the Bet-ul-Mal. The Bet-ul-Mal run under a particular board and system and rules. And whoever ran them, please go to them and ask them.
In contrast to the lot of the poor, at the Prime Minister's house, Miss Bhutto's husband enjoyed special privileges. 2 14-acre polo fields were carved out of a mountain, along with a practice area for his polo-playing friends. 47 stables were built for his polo ponies, all at public expense. We've obtained documents from Islamabad's local authority, which had to foot the bill. They detail the works and the costs, millions of rupees. In all, Mr. Zardari's lifestyle is reckoned to have cost the state over £1 million.
What lifestyle? I live on government expense. For the last 3 years, all my expenses are paid by the government. Living in a PM house, you don't pay for nothing.
Well, for example, why is it that the government was expected to pay the expenses for your polo ponies?
They weren't paying for my polo ponies. There were a bunch of friends. Polo field is a grass field 14 acres long. It's not a multi-story building that you're constructing with a lot of money. And let them bring that charge against me. Let them prove it.
The final straw for the Pakistani public was the claim by a British newspaper that the first couple had bought a mansion in England. They hotly denied it. The Rockwood estate in Surrey cost £2.5 million. The mysterious new owners were reclusive. They quickly applied for planning permission for 64 stables. Security was tight, and the local talk was that the house was for the Bhuttos.
I have never in my life been to Rockwood. I have never seen Rockwood. I have never seen an estate agent that has anything to do with Rockwood. I don't know what this Rockwood thing is.
We've obtained pictures of Rockwood's opulent Pakistani decor, supervised by the wife of one of Mr. Zardari's closest friends. And there were even reports that Asif himself had been seen at the property.
It is generally believed that you are the owner, or if not the owner, certainly the person who would have occupied that property.
I've never even seen Surrey, leave alone occupy it. And if I have, then let them prove it. It's not impossible to prove. Let them prove it.
But despite Mr. Zardari's claim that Rockwood isn't his, the President points to a trail of documents leading from his home in Karachi to Surrey. A Pakistan Airways shipping bill shows that items of furniture and carpets were sent from Bilawal House, the first couple's home in Karachi, to London in April last year. That month, the Foreign Ministry in Islamabad, under the instructions of the PM House, directed the High Commissioner in London to take charge of the shipment. A copy of the memo was sent to Mr. Zardari's secretary. The High Commissioner then authorised the main building contractor for Rockwood, a Mr. Paul Keating, to collect the goods. They were duly released to Mr. Keating on May the 2nd.
But the shipping documents for articles which went into the house came from your house in Karachi.
There are no shipping documents. There's nothing that went into the house. There are shipping documents of furniture and so-called carpets moving from Pakistan to England.
Yes, but from your house in Pakistan.
Yeah, my house in Pakistan.
Your house in England.
No, there is no house in England.
Whatever the truth about Rockwood, the affair caused a storm in Pakistan, raising wider questions about the couple's lifestyle at home and abroad. How could Miss Bhutto afford it on a declared income of just £15,000?
My income and expenditure match. I come from a well-off family. You ask my friends at Oxford. I drove an MGB sports car when I was at Oxford. You ask my friends at Oxford. I went to all the expensive restaurants when I was at Oxford. But I chose to give up a life of luxury and privilege for a life of hardship. I chose a life of trial and tribulation in Pakistan's political minefield because I had a dream to change society. And for that, I give up everything.
She is a wealthy woman, but the lifestyle that she is preparing to lead is, I think, far beyond the wealth that the family has bestowed on her.
When you say the lifestyle she's preparing to lead, what do you mean?
Well, I'm talking about palaces in Surrey, for instance, and polo fields and polo ponies and heaven knows what.
हर तरफ एक ही तस्वीर है तुम कहो क्या मेरी बस यही तकदीर है.
One of Pakistan's biggest stars pleads for ehtisab, accountability, demanding that corrupt politicians be made accountable for looting the country. Salman Ahmed has produced a video contrasting the lives of fat cat politicians and businessmen with that of ordinary people. The stories about the Surrey mansion prompted the song.
We looked at this story about the Surrey Palace, you know, of what, 800 rooms or whatever it was, you know, 2.5 million pounds. And if you go into Pakistan and you look at how the common man is living, you know, it's just, you know, you get very angry that the common man doesn't have clean drinking water. His kids can't